Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Puerto Rico Energy Forum's latest news roundup. We're trying out this new format to bring you the most recent news and a bit of our own analysis. We'll still be releasing our regular conversations with energy sector experts, but this segment keeps us and you up to date with the most topical news and what we think about it. We'll try to get this out every week, and nobody told us to stop after last week. Therefore, let's dig in. It's late February and we've officially come to the end of Groundhog Month. Makes sense. It certainly feels like we're waking up to the same grid disaster we've seen before. We're covering 4 major developments that reveal exactly where Puerto Rico's energy sector stands. But before we get into the major headlines, here are a few developments to keep your eyes on. The Energy Bureau certified the $1.2 billion for streetlight repairs across the island. How it gets rolled out, whether it's municipal or Luma, is still an open question, but the process has begun to bring illumination back to many of the communities across Puerto Rico. Never too late. Legacy solar project developers are suing PREPA and the FOMB on behalf as and are suing PREPA as recommend has and the FOMB on its behalf has recommended the process go to formal discovery. Damages total some $800 million for projects that saw a start-stop process for the last decade or more. Litigation is scheduled for 2027, but this doesn't help anyone get out of bankruptcy. Speaking of bankruptcy, the governor is urging the federal courts to return the Luma legal battle to local courts, but the fact of the matter is that the bankruptcy is a federal proceeding, and because the Oversight Board is acting on behalf of PREPA given its outstanding debt obligations, this will likely stay at the federal level. One more note, because we care about economic growth, energy demand in January rose by a percentage point, mostly driven by industrial users. However, looking at 2025 as a whole, consumption dropped some 5.5 percentage points, the first dip in 3 years. These are bad omens, as energy is pretty closely linked to economic activity. Without energy, what can we really do as a community to prosper? None of this is good news, but it's all important news. And now your headlines. Headline number 1. The Energy Bureau fines PREPA $25,000 for missing rate case deadline, and we expose deeper dysfunction. The Energy Bureau imposed a $25,000 on PREPA for failing to comply with a procedural order in the rate review case. Here's what happened. On February 9th, PREPA requested an extension to file its reply on revenue requirements and rate design, claiming it had identified, quote, areas of concern that could affect the proceeding. The Bureau granted an extension until February 11th, and then PREPA requested another 24-hour extension minutes before the deadline, but failed to comply with that deadline also. 7 days after the original deadline, the document still hadn't been filed. The Bureau's response was blunt, quote, this demonstrates total disrespect for the Bureau and its orders. The $25,000 fine was imposed under Article 6.36 of Act 57/2014. Here's why this matters beyond the fine. PREPA is claiming there are legal concerns that could affect the entire rate case proceeding, but won't actually articulate what those concerns are. The Bureau ordered the corporation to explain its legal objections, gave it a deadline, extended the deadline, and PREPA still hasn't filed. This is either institutional incompetence or deliberate obstruction. Either way, it's a problem. The rate case is supposed to determine how much money Luma, Genera, and PREPA need to operate the system and how those costs get allocated to ratepayers. If PREPA has legal concerns about the process, those need to be aired immediately so they can be addressed. Radio silence for 7 days after a deadline isn't legal strategy, it's dysfunction. The fine is final unless PREPA seeks reconsideration within 20 days, but the bigger issue is what this says about PREPA's capacity to participate competently in regulatory proceedings that determine the financial future of Puerto Rico's grid. Headline number 2. Luma proposes a 900% fixed charge increase, but let's talk about utility economics. Luma Energy wants to increase the residential fixed monthly charge from approximately $4 to over $40, 900% increase. The Puerto Rico Solar and Energy Storage Association, SESA, and Solar United Neighbors, SUN, filed a motion before the Energy Bureau opposing the request, which comes as part of Luma's rate design restructuring in the ongoing rate review case. Let's be clear about what's at stake here, but also let's be honest about utility economics. Fixed charges are the amount you pay every month regardless of how much electricity you use. Right now, if you're a residential customer, you pay about $4 a month in fixed charges, plus consumption charges based on kilowatt hours used. Under Luma's proposal, you'd pay $40 a month before you even turn on a single light. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Grid infrastructure costs money, whether you use electricity or not. Poles, wires, transformers, substations, they all require maintenance, upgrades, and eventual replacement. Those costs are real, and they have to be recovered somehow. Luma's argument for high fixed charges is revenue stability. If most revenue comes from consumption, then conservation, efficiency, and solar adoption create a death spiral where per kilowatt hour rates have to keep rising to cover fixed infrastructure costs spread across fewer kilowatt hours. That's a real problem. But Luma's solution is the wrong one. CESA argues the proposal would disproportionately affect low income households, low consumption users, and solar customers, and that high fixed charges force low consumption users to subsidize heavier users while penalizing those who invest in energy efficiency. A fine argument. A $40 fixed charge eliminates conservation incentives entirely. If I'm paying $40 a month whether I use 100 kilowatt hours or 1,000 kilowatt hours, why would I conserve? To put this in context, most US utilities charge fixed fees between $8 and $20 a month. The UK's standing charge is about $21 a month. Luma is proposing 40, double what's typical in developed markets with functional grids. Mesa and Sun argue the proposal violates the principle of gradualism in rate design promoted by the Energy Bureau itself, and proposed maintaining the current fixed charge and exploring inclining block rates, IBR, where rates increase with consumption tiers, providing revenue stability while rewarding efficiency. But let's go further. Maybe the answer isn't 4 or 40. Maybe it's a fixed charge of $20 to cover basic infrastructure costs, plus inclining block rates, so higher consumption pays more per kilowatt hour, plus time of use rates, so peak demand costs more than off-peak. That structure gives Luma revenue stability, maintains conservation incentives, rewards efficiency, and sends price signals that reduce peak demand. It's more complex to administer, but it's how modern utilities manage the tension between cost recovery and customer incentives. The Energy Bureau needs to reject Luma's $40 proposal and order development of a comprehensive rate structure that balances utility economics with customer affordability and conservation goals. We still have to cover the cost of operation somehow, and we likely won't like any option. But a well-designed rate structure distributes that burden fairly, rather than putting it all on a fixed charge that punishes exactly the customers who are doing the right thing. Headline number 3. The ASAP battery program is officially suspended as Energy Bureau prioritizes other renewable procurements. The Accelerated Storage Addition program was supposed to be the fast track to getting battery storage online. Phase 1 projects were supposed to be operational by April 2025. Well, we're now in late February 2026, and not a single Phase 1 project has been executed. On September 26, 2025, the Energy Bureau made it official. The Bureau issued a resolution stating the Energy Bureau stays sine die all actions in the instant case and warned that this stay does not constitute a dismissal of the case, nor does it release any party from its contractual or regulatory obligations. The reason? The Bureau announced the temporary suspension, citing the need to prioritize regulatory actions on renewable energy procurements pursuant to Executive Order 2025-47, signed by Governor González Colón. Here's the kicker. The Bureau stated the need for energy storage capacity is limited, and depending on the outcomes of the procurement process, the capacity offered in the ASAP program might not be necessary. Let's unpack that. Before the suspension, 4 Phase 1 standard offer agreements totaling 110 megawatts of battery storage remained unsigned due to disagreements between Luma Energy and project developers over interconnection costs and contract terms. Luma had claimed Phase 1 projects could begin immediately with minimal interconnection costs, and then it submitted documentation showing $1.3 million in interconnection study costs. The Energy Bureau issued an order to show cause why Luma shouldn't be fined for misrepresenting material facts. Luma responded that any lack of precision was due to technical complexity, and the Energy Bureau ultimately didn't fine Luma, but it did make clear that interconnection costs hadn't been properly disclosed. Meanwhile, developers waited on Luma to finalize their agreements on project participation before they could satisfy signing conditions. So here's where we are. ASAP was supposed to add 360 megawatts of battery storage in 2 phases. Phase 1 of 185 megawatts was supposed to be online in 12 months with minimal costs. We're now 18 plus months into the process with 0 megawatts operational, and the entire program is on indefinite hold while the Bureau prioritizes other renewable procurements. The Bureau is essentially saying, we're going to procure solar plus storage through other channels, and if those procurements deliver enough storage, we might not need ASAP at all. I have no idea how they think that offering this type of opinion is in their mandate. Don't they know the grid is desperate for more players? Why even signal that we may not want participation like this? It's sort of like when your fiance throws the ring in your face and you rationalize it as we were never really supposed to be together anyways. This is Puerto Rico energy procurement in microcosm. Ambitious timelines, underestimated complexity, institutional conflicts between Luma and developers, regulatory stop and start, and ultimately no megawatts delivered. Battery storage is critical for grid stability. ASAP was supposed to be the accelerated path. It's not accelerated. Headline number 4. The Oversight Board and 3PPO are in a battle over Power Expectations Contract Authority. The Fiscal Oversight Board rejected 3PPO's allegations that it exceeded its statutory authority, arguing its requests for information are fully consistent with PROMESA and necessary to safeguard Puerto Rico from fiscal and operational risk. The board cited PROMESA Section 104C2, which empowers it to obtain any information needed to enforce the law, and Section 204B2, which requires ensuring contracts promote market competition and align with the fiscal plan. The board said concerns raised by the documents from 3PPO justify continued scrutiny. Power Expectations appears to have limited financial capacity, minimal experience with large-scale energy projects, and background issues involving the company's principal that were not disclosed during procurement. Then, the really damning detail. The Public-Private Partnership Authority acknowledged it conducted no due diligence or background checks on parties involved in the RFP. The Public-Private Partnerships Authority, the entity responsible for procurement, didn't vet the contractor at all. PREP stated in December that its authority was, quote, strictly limited to verifying compliance with utility regulations, not evaluating competition, fiscal impacts, or vendor qualifications. So PREB reviewed regulatory compliance, but not vendor qualifications. P3A ran the procurement, but didn't do due diligence. The 3PPO selected the vendor, but now objects to anyone questioning the selection. This is a jurisdictional gap that allowed a potentially problematic contract, one that jumped from 19 cents per kilowatt hour to 32 cents per hour with a contractor who has serious challenges, to advance through multiple approval stages without anyone checking whether the company could deliver. The board reserves the right to block execution or enforcement of the contract if it determines the procurement or contract violate PROMESA or the certified fiscal plan. The 3PPO argues delays are unacceptable and the grid needs capacity now. That's true, but the solution to urgent need isn't waiving accountability, it's building institutional capacity to do emergency procurement competently. The Oversight Board is doing what fiscal oversight is supposed to do, asking hard questions when procurement processes fail, basic due diligence. The problem isn't board overreach. The problem is that 3 separate entities touched this procurement and none of them caught obvious red flags. All right, that's your brief. The common thread? We're waking up to the same grid disaster we've seen before. PREPA can't meet regulatory deadlines in its own rate case. Luma proposes rate structures that ignore basic utility economics and international best practices. The ASAP battery projects that were supposed to be operational a year ago are suspended indefinitely while the Bureau pivots to other procurement processes. And emergency power procurement advances without basic due diligence until the Oversight Board intervenes. Groundhog Month indeed. Same problems, different date. And who do you think pays all these fines being issued? We do. All right, thanks for tuning in. Hope you like this new news format. Don't forget to engage with our material, share your thoughts, and let us know what you think we missed, got wrong, or completely nailed. And we'll talk to you soon.